Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Titans. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. And it's kind of interesting. We start off with like the whole Dick and Barbara situation, which I'm kind of being like cute. It's like, oh, we're kind of officially like in relationship status, because even at one point later on in the episode, she calls him babe. It's like, yo, we have babe status. To be fair, it's like they're kind of picking up from where they were before, so I think a lot of that kind of like gets jumped around, because you're like, right, they already kind of had that repertoire, and it's like, right, we're just kind of picking up where we left off. Things got complicated, but we found our way back to each other, so I'm like, I guess that's why. But it was actually kind of cute. Like, I just couldn't help nothing. Oh, he called him babe. I don't know, that's super cute. Like the fact is he got that shorthand. I also appreciate there's a giant T in the sky, and I love Dick being like, yeah, I just need to be a little bit bigger than the bat symbol. Just like, I'm sure he was mainly joking, but I'm sure there was on some part about, it'd be nice if you could make it a little bit bigger to the bat signal. And it's also interesting because obviously that was like Gordon's way to get to Batman, but it's like, yeah, it's almost like the next generation to a certain extent, doing that. So I think that's kind of pretty dope that it's like Barbara who kind of set that up ahead of time. I did think it was interesting that I was wondering like what they were doing with the fact is that the whole like the ceiling to like the GCPD was like leaking like that. I was like, obviously like it ends up having its significance later on, but first I was like, that's so weird. Like, but I guess it's also like, right, maybe they're just not getting like I mean, obviously like this place is a lot more high tech than most GCPDs we see, but then it's like, well, I'm also thinking about like Gotham's GCPD. Well, because most Gotham GCPDs aren't as like high tech as hers is, like as Barbara's. Because I never thought about that before, but it's like, right, because they're mostly like kind of grungier like police departments. It's typically whether it's like it was like that in Gotham, it was like that in the Nolan movies if I remember correctly. So like, it being as high-tech as it is, I never even thought about that. I'm surprised that it just crossed my mind to it. Now I'm just like, oh yeah, like that's typically not, because I guess it's because I really didn't think about it, because like, yeah, that seemed like something that would be in like your more typical like grungy like GCPD, not the more like very clean like high-tech one that they kind of have. But regardless, Dick is supposed to be taking Barbara to like, they're supposed to be going to like a gala together, but this kid Tim shows up. And he knows that Dick is like Nightwing and everything, and it's like, oh, I was under the impression like Tim and like Jason like had a relationship or something, like they were tight like that or something. It's like, no, apparently not. Like Tim just is super good at what he does, and he like went full detective mode, and he was like, dude, I was there like before your parents died, like you actually signed this for me. So it's like, oh, like you actually have an in and a deeper connection to it. I'm like, do they? I have to look and do some research into that, but like, do Tim and Dick usually have like a tie together like that? It's like, it's that kind of a comic book thing right there. Because I've never known about like, I've known about how Dick joined. Like I've known since like, what was that, Batman Forever, where Chris O'Donnell played Dick Grayson. Like I've known them, but I've never known like how the others have joined. Like I've never known how Jason joined, or like Stephanie or Tim or even Damien. I mean, I know Damien comes out of the woodwork of like, yo, you're my dad. Like, but at what point does like does he know that Bruce is Batman, considering who his dad, I mean, considering who his mom is, like, would he automatically know that? And questions like that. So it's like, it's so interesting to know, like, that's because amongst them, like I said, Dick's the only one I've known his introduction, how he came into Bruce's life, like how he came into this world of Robin. But I typically don't, because most stuff I watch, Tim is just like, oh, and I'm Robin, like, just depending on the continuity, just because I'm not well versed in the comics and stuff. So like I said, that's something I'm gonna have to do a little more research on later on. But I just thought that was fascinating, and he figured it out because it's like, oh, this particular move I saw Robin do it, which immediately, and then he's like, right, I noticed too that Nightwing does this like very specific move too, so it's kind of like a thing of like, Dick's kind of be like, oh yeah, like I can't copyright my moves, so like Robin and Nightwing stole it, that's all there is to it. But for him it's like, no, I know there's more here, I know. And he's like, because he even talks about it, like he even eventually brought it up that he figured out that Jason was Robin, but that kind of got thrown out the door when he found out, like, wait, oh, the moment Robin was killed, he thought it was Jason, but it's like seeing Jason across the street. It's like, oh no, like I must be wrong. It must be, because that's why he was so shocked at the beginning, because it was kind of like, but I guess it's just like in general, like he admired them, and I guess like he's always been fascinated with the Bat family and stuff like that. Regardless, I mean that's pretty clear. It's kind of interesting to think about, like if he started off as kind of a fanboy typically in the comics or something, and then became like part of the Bat family. Once again, I'm gonna have to do some research on my part, but obviously Dick's like, I don't know what you're talking about, kind of having, you know, and kind of ends up dropping him off back home, and it's like, or at least near his house, and he's like, you know, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's not who I am. If there's anything I can do, because he's like, Tim learned all that he knows because his dad's a detective, or, you know, as a cop, and it's like, right, I know, like, you know, my dad taught me, like, 2 things, how to be a good detective and how to shoot a gun, so. But he's also the one that noticed that Jason was, like, across the street. He's like, immediately was like, oh yeah, Jason. And it's like, because the reason why because he's like, he picks up on those things. Like, he's got, like, a nice, like, eye for detail, because he's the one that picked up on, like, oh yeah, like the same movements and stuff. Like, it was like, so like Jason moves like Robin, you know? So that's kind of interesting to think about. Like, as a superhero, you would also have to change your mannerisms. I mean, once again, I guess that's kind of like where you get to the, like, your Clark Kent Superman thing of like, he has to kind of be like, oh, so unassuming. So you have to kind of be like, oh, kind of a clumsy goofball sometimes. Not goofball, but necessarily you have to seem like clumsy and just like, oh, you can't be like one of the world's greatest heroes. It's just not possible. So I guess it's like, you have to kind of think about that with your secret identity and stuff like that. But just because you have people with keen senses and observation skills like Tim being able to pick up like, oh, you kind of move the same way too. I think that's kind of interesting. Because there's some other things that went down I skipped over. Like, first and foremost, like, the fact is that picking up where the last episode left off, we did have Gar meeting with Molly. And it's like, what does my friend, like, Jason have to do with, like, a Titan? And it's like, oh, we have friends in common. It's like, right, I guess it's like, well, Jason never told her. And it's like, it's not my business to tell. Like, you would think under these circumstances, but, you know, it's like, right, like, we're just going to do whatever we can to help, which she's immediately like, are you going to try and hurt him? It's like, no, there are people who want him dead, but I just want to try and fix it because I just want to talk to him. But it's like, and she's like, do you think you're up to the job? And he's like, nah, but yeah, me and some people I know, you know, referencing the Titans. So, because Gar's the only one amongst them who hasn't really given up. Like, the others kind of have, just because of everything. I mean, especially killing Hank really pushed it over the edge. I mean, all the other innocent people, they were going to give him some leeway. Not necessarily, like, but even with all that death, but they definitely weren't going to let that slide. They definitely aren't going to let you killing Hank, one of your fellow Titans and a friend and ally in his family that you guys built. It's like, you basically killed your part of your family, so... which ties in interestingly enough, because I feel like this is our first time seeing Jason like full blown like junkie. Like, I mean, he's been kind of in that junkie mode with this whole inhaler thing, but like the dark circles under his eye, like he looks like he's going through withdrawal. It's like, man, he's bad off, and he's just like, I need another inhaler. And obviously you have Crane saying like, yeah, I'm on. Like, the fact is, this is going to be it. We're going to basically have Gotham tear itself apart, you know. Friends against friends, family against family type of thing. But Jason's kind of done. And I guess it's because without the inhaler, like, all that, like... Because when he initially came to Crane, he was just so angry. And now, like, he's just kind of empty, you know? It's just like, now that, like... You know, because he's been numbing himself so long with that inhaler that I think, like, it probably is having lasting effects to the point, like, yeah, he's going through withdrawal. So maybe that's the main reason why he's lashing out. It's not even like, oh, he's come to his senses. It's like, his senses, it's just like, no, I'm just angry and just going through withdrawal. So I'm, like, angry in general. So it's not like I'm fully, like, back to... There's some parts of it creeping through, because it's kind of like when Crane makes a crack about like, oh yeah, who's that person you killed again? Oh yeah, like Hank, and it pisses him off, and it's just kind of like, it's just now he has to face what he did. Like, at least with the inhaler, he can numb himself off to just not feel anything for it, but now he's feeling what he did. So he ends up knocking Crane out. He's like, I'm done with you. And when he ended up getting tracked by Dick, Dick ended up getting hit by a car, which kind of sucked major ass. But, you know, Jason was standing over him, and even later on, he's telling Barbara, like, if I had, like, Jason had the chance, he could have just easily killed me, but he didn't. So, despite all the resentment and stuff, maybe there's some part of Jason still there. Like, maybe he's the one that anonymously called 911. And Barbara's like, right. So, because Dick is talking about finishing things like Batman would. But she's like, well, we don't have to go to that extreme if Jason's willing to turn himself in. So, at least, like, keep that. We're going to try that first. And Dick just kind of nods along, like, right. Like, in a sense of, like, yeah, he is. Because I think for him, it's like, because Barbara does want to take, like, this route rather than going the full-blown, oh, Batman just sneaking into Arkham Asylum and bashing in the Joker's head type of thing. Like, no, I want to do this the right way. Because she's all about handling things the just way. Because, it's like, Jason doesn't deserve to, like, just be, hunted down and killed. It's like, no, he needs to face justice for what he's done. That means going about things the right way, so... So obviously she's testing out, like, Dick's, like, ability to read stuff. And, like, say, oh, he's reading the line. She's like, all right, the 8th line. And he starts reading it, and it morphs into a bat. I'm like, the hell? I'm like, but then everything shifts back, and he just labels everything, like, the letters off and stuff. So I was like, what the hell was that? I was like, is that part of your concussion? I'm starting to think this might be tied to Rachel, because Corey's going through the same thing. She's having visions again, because I thought before, like, the visions and stuff like that she was having was tied to her sister, but it seems like it's someone else. And I'm surprised that, because I assumed, like, her visions and everything, because at the time she was the only one having them, I assumed that was a Blackfire thing, but now it's like, no, it's most likely got to be a Rachel thing, because her whole they presented it last season because Corey and Dawn were the only one being like, wait, that Bruce we met, that wasn't real? Was that Rachel? Like, it's like, huh. I don't know if they were probably never sure enough to really bring that up to everyone else, because it's like, huh, what was that all about? So I think it's got to be Rachel trying to point them in the right direction of, like, she's showing them these visions, because I think she's trying to, because even later on, Corey's kind of lost control, which, the fact of the matter is, we have, like, Superboy and, Blackfire getting in. I'm like, yo, and locations of it's like, oh, show me Tamarin, and I love it. It's like, whoa, did you just give me your address? It's just like, yeah, I did. I thought that was kind of actually really sweet. And the fact is that he was asking, like, does she ever think she'll be able to go home? Will she ever go back? And she's like, I don't think I can. But while they were doing it, though, like, we do, like, at first I was like, oh, is that some purple, or is that just, like, lighting of, like, the scene or something? It's like, no, there's actual purple in there. So I was like, is she generating some other power, I'm wondering? Like, in the sense of, like, there's something buried within, because she thinks, like, only one sibling can get, like, the fire of the people, and that's kind of looked upon like, oh, you're the special child and everything, because it's something that's passed down in her family, and only Corey got it. But I'm wondering, like, if is it going to be revealed, like, Blackfire has, like, a polar opposite to that ability, and it's there within her, but it's just so deeply buried that it's slowly coming out now. But now, like, that also makes me wonder, and this is me just being, like, my suspicious tinfoil hat on and everything, that I'm like, is she actually playing them? Like, does she know, like, is she trying to create a situation where her powers come forward? Or is it going to be a thing of, like, oh, she is a good guy for a while until she finds out, like, wait, I have powers, and then she starts running rogue type of thing? I'm curious. I hope we don't find out that she's deceiving them on some level. I hope this is sincere and that this isn't all just some, like, giant ploy. We'll see. But I thought it was interesting when they were doing their thing and Corey was just standing at the foot of the bed. I was like, she's not saying anything. That's creepy. But I love that Connor just immediately kind of ran out just to get dressed and stuff. But it was interesting because in that moment, Blackfire was like Corey, and like there was a sound wave that came out and knocked her out of it. And I was like, what? So like I said, I think there's something there buried deep within. And it's like, oh, you're about to burn me. She's like, what am I? Oh. And I love Blackfire being like, I was just sleeping. I was like, I love that. But I love the whole, like, them being awkward and everything. I was like, oh, no, we worked well together. Like, you do? It's like, yeah, I mean, or we can. And she's like, okay. And then when she went in her trance and came out of it, she's like, it's like, no, I'll be fine. You two go on ahead. You two sleeping together? And there's just kind of the awkwardness and like, well, they're trying to figure out, like, what's happening. It's like, do we just forget it? Which Connor's like, no, he can't. It's like the first time she's like, oh, with a Tamarin. He was like, no, with anybody. She's like, oh, okay. But she's like, honestly, I didn't want to forget it either, But it's like, I am the bad sister after all. And he was like, you're not bad. He was like, she's like, well, you're not bad either. He's like, well, I'm half bad, but still, I get your point. And I love the fact that she's kind of smiling, and it's like, actually, it's super adorable, like, what's happening between them. Because, like, would have never guessed that was what they would have set this up to be, like a whole Blackfire and Superboy thing. So that's interesting. But what Corey saw was interesting because she heard someone kind of crying out. And at first I was like, is that supposed to be her mom? Well, their mom? And there's like a baby carriage, and it's like there's a blanket over it, and the child has like glowing green eyes. And I'm like, she kept being like, yeah, someone's trying to show me something. And I'm like, what is that? Like, and that's why I'm like, it has to be Rachel, because I guess like maybe Rachel has like some foresight into like she's trying to guide everyone in the right directions, because maybe she saw like the future or something, and she's trying to point them in the direction of like she's seen how things could go bad. Like maybe this whole thing, she's basically seeing how this season ends and is going to go super bad, so she's trying to change them along the way, and it kind of making it their choice of like, I'm trying to point you in the right direction without fully like taking your free will away from you. So I'm trying to show you something enough that can point you in the right direction or something. I don't know. I don't, that's where my immediate thought is. Because it's just interesting, because like I said, it's only been Corey so far, and now suddenly it's Dick, and now it's like, is that going to eventually translate over to, because like Gar did like say like for a second, like, you know, he needed, like after everything had gone down, like he was like asking, like, you know, he was pretending to talk to Rachel, but it's like maybe on some level she was listening, and so like it's almost like like maybe that's what we'll find out. Like, because we do know she pops up at some point in the season. It might not be till like near the end of the season, but maybe we'll get a flashback episode of like like an entire episode dedicated to what she's been up to, and then we'll find out like, right, like ever since Gar got in contact, like she's been sending those out and trying to get Corey to go, I don't know, move in a certain regard. Like, it's just, Connor hasn't had it yet necessarily, nor has Gar, so that just makes me want, or even Blackfire. It's just been Starfire and Nightwing so far, but we'll see kind of where things gonna go on that front. You do have Jason eventually contacting through Molly, and he wants to meet with Dick by himself in a specific tunnel that they know. And Dick goes, and lo and behold, who runs into? Tim, because Tim's been following him. But obviously for him, it's like to prove that, you know, I want to be Robin. I want to be the next Robin, which obviously like Dick's not going to feel too good about that, because I didn't know, being Robin, kind of being drafted into this at such a young age, it screwed me up. It screwed Jason up. Granted, like Bruce isn't around to run things, but it's almost like you can almost feel like, yeah, it's almost that being Robin's almost cursed in a way, because it's like both of them got jacked up, but that's more so on Bruce. But you know, I'm sure Dick is going to be super reluctant to kind of take someone else under his wing to become a Robin, considering like what that position has done to him and Jason. But we'll see. But Tim's also about getting revenge on Red Hood and Scarecrow. I don't know if he pieced it together that Jason and Red Hood are saying, because he probably hasn't seen Red Hood enough face to face. He's seen Jason and Robin, so he knows that connection, but not to the Red Hood thing. But Dick meets with Jason, and he's just like, I want to come home, because I skipped over it, but there was like that porn show that he went to or whatever, and it's like, right, what do you want us to do? He's like, I want you to pretend to be Hank, I want you to pretend to be Dawn. And it's like, right, he's like, I want to say I'm sorry. He's like, it's okay. And it's like, he's like, I'm sorry I killed you. And the guy was like, whoa, weirded out by it. And, you know, the girl's talking to him, and she's like, I'm sure whatever he did, whatever you did, he deserved it. And he was like, actually, no, he didn't. And for her, it's like, well, I've done some bad, were you high? He's like, yeah, but that's no excuse. She's like, I've done some pretty bad things when I was high, but there's only one place you can be forgiven. At first I was like, is she about to say church? I was like, no, home. You know, basically, like, your family will always forgive you. They'll be there to welcome you with open arms despite everything. Which, you know, she's like, time's up, sweetie. And the shutters go down, and for him, it's like, that's too late. He already doing what he did and doing all that he's done. He's like, I can't go home. My home is gone. So we did see Jason end up talking to, back in the tunnels, he ends up talking to Dick about, like, right, I want to come home, which Dick does offer him, like, right, we are family, so of course you can come back. I didn't know whether it's just because of what Barbara said. Is it because it's what he's trying to handle things a little differently? Or at first I was like, is he saying that just to lure Jason back? But it seems like he is sincere about it to some extent. But then, like, we had Crane listening nearby. And that's why I was thinking, like, well, because we do find, like, jumping around, we do find out later on that it was a trap. But I'm curious, at what point was it before Jason? It had to be before Jason showed up there, because he gave him, like, a very specific address to go to at a time, didn't he? So it's like, so it had to be like after that show, like feeling like, oh, I can't go back home. He must have decided to go back to Crane, which Crane had his own thing this episode. He wasn't he tried to get through a certain floor with a certain drill, and it's like, oh, like it's like 10 feet down, and he'd never make it with like a concrete drill. So yeah, it almost sounded like he felt bad for killing that guy. I guess it's also because like Crane's not used to necessarily getting his own hands dirty. He ends up going to his mom, and he's like breaking down the fact is that he's got this terror that he can't shake. And I love that she's like, is it in the form of like, he's like this shadowy creature, and she's like, is it a bat? Is it like Batman? She's just like, no, it's a fucking metaphor. How can you not get that? This isn't about a bat. It's just a metaphor. It's like, I'm sorry. But it turns out like she tipped off the cops because she was basically like tearing him down, which I'm like, well, should you really be doing that to your supervillain psychopath of a son? But I guess it was like she was just buying enough time. But essentially she was calling him out for being weak, that the fact is that he always kind of uses others. Like he could never like take a risk himself. He always has to try and do everything calculated, but he would never like have any like direct connection or confrontation with people. He always has someone be his buffer zone. In this particular case, Jason ends up being his buffer zone, which he even calls him later on is like my prized possession. So I guess like he's the perfect blunt instrument for you to get what you want. I guess that's kind of the purpose of it, because even he was saying it, he's like, yeah, I'm using you, blah 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 type of thing at the beginning. But it seems like, yeah, like after Jason left that whole like thing of like, oh, you can like you should go back home, and he's like, I can't. Like I think that's when he probably like either Crane tracked him down, because Crane did like know exactly where he was, so they probably met up before. Like that's probably why he was waiting nearby, you know. So it made it seem like Jason was still away from him, because it seemed like it might be a thing of like, oh, he hears all that Jason's saying and he's kind of like, damn you, Jason, I'm against you now. But it's like, no, it seems like they were working together, that they played him, which that whole thing does lead to the complicated conversation amongst the Titans. It's like Corey's like, how can you do that? It's like, yeah, not only did he murder Hank, he murdered a lot of innocent people too. Like Corey's like, we can't forgive him, so did Connor. But then like Dick's like, yeah, but the fact is that, you know, because, like, for Gar's sake, he's like, right, but it might just be the drugs or whatever. It's like, you know, it was Scarecrow to put him up. It's like, for Dick, it's like, no matter what, he needs to face justice for what he did. But Gar's like, after I was controlled by Cadmus, like, last season, killing and killed people, you guys didn't turn on me. You accepted me back because we're a family. But so for Dick, it's like, right, well, the moment we capture him, then we'll kind of come back to this conversation about what to do. But then you had like Corey being like, this is kind of a mistake. Bruce told you to be a better Batman, where there's two versions, one that kills and one that doesn't. You know, and just, you have Dick, I guess he just honestly hasn't 100% decided what he's going to do, what his decision on this is going to be. I think he wants to try and save Jason because he kept seeing like flashbacks to a younger version of himself. Not unless that was supposed to be Jason, but I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be him, obviously, right? So I think it's like Rachel trying to show him like these who you were before, so that he's even more sympathetic going into this thing of like, right, like, because saving Jason is almost like being able to save yourself to an extent. Like, if you kill Jason, you'll be damning yourself forever because you'll never forgive yourself. You'll just be repeating the same mistakes that Bruce did. But if you're able to save him, you can make up, you know, and you can break this cycle that's kind of been perpetuating, you know, that Bruce has perpetuated with you as well as with Jason, with everyone, you know. So we'll see how that shakes out. Obviously, Tim starts following Jason, and that leads to him running into Crane, who shoots him. Luckily, the Titans roll up in time, but sadly, the whole thing was a trap. And the moment Corey tries to attack him, you know, he's like, right, I don't take any risk. Fuck you, Mom. And ends up, you know, putting himself in danger just so that Corey will fire at him and blow open like the main thing that connects to all the water in Gotham. And it's like, right, they played into his hands, and now that stuff is pumping, that concentration, that massive concentration is pumping throughout all of Gotham's water, which said water is then dripping down into GCPD, and I'm like, well, none of it's landing on Barbara, but maybe it's just a thing of it just being in the water and just kind of like, it's just kind of a thing of like, it's like, I don't think that's going to have any effect on them, because I don't think it's like, oh, maybe like if it like turns into precipitation, like maybe then it might be an issue. But I think it's just kind of being like, oh, like just when that happens, like the water like happens to bust open through the ceiling at GCPD, and then on, you know, and it's just supposed to, I think, be representative of just like the chaos that's going to rain down. I don't know if that's what it's supposed to be, like imagery for like the chaos that's coming to Gotham, or maybe it will have some effect on them in GCPD, because the water's getting cleaned up. But we'll see how that all plays out. But that's the sad thing of like getting played by maybe if Dick and Jason had been able to talk before Ichabod. I was about to say, I keep wanting to say Ichabod Crane, before Jonathan Crane found him. That's why I kind of just stick with Scarecrow, because like every time I say Crane, I want to say Ichabod in front of it rather than Jonathan. Like Ichabod, because of Sleepy Hollow, is a lot more natural for me to say, even more so than Jonathan, because I've never, so most villains I just call them by like their villain moniker. Like in his case, like a lot of times I just refer to him as Scarecrow. I won't go by the Crane moniker, call him Crane. Regardless, my point was like, Jason was in enough of a free fall position of like, it was just a matter of who got to him first. It sadly ended up being Jonathan who got to him first rather than Dick, you know, because that could have changed everything. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what befalls Gotham going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.